Your to-do list should never be a motivator. And what I say is if it comes 3:00 and you finish your to-do list, nobody is stopping you from taking new tasks. But the whole day, you shouldn't live under the premise that you're going to finish what you know you won't finish. So the simplest thing in to-do list is cut things out as much as possible that you know you won't do or that you don't know for sure that you will do, then cut them out of your to-do list. If you want, I tell people, create a wish list for the day. So you have a task list and a wish list.
Shea, thank you so much for joining me on the Let's Talk Business podcast.
Hi, Meny.
So I love this episode that we're about to have because the topic is all about productivity. And I think there's one thing that we all have in common, regardless who you are, if you are the president of the United States or any other country, or if you're a leader running your own show, or even an employee in a company, which is we all have the same amount of time. It's probably the only thing, almost one of the only things you cannot buy on Fiverr. Like you can buy additional time. So the way we structure our time and the way we work with our productivity, it really makes a huge difference as far as the input we're able to do and ultimately the output in our productivity. So I appreciate you coming on the show. You know, I've been seeing some of your work, and recently I've had a couple of people that suggested I have you on the show. So here we are. Thank you for making the time.
Sure.
So
Thanks.
yeah, so for our listeners that don't know you, know anything about you, you know, there's a lot of people that are, you know, had businesses and went into coaching, consulting, and so on and so forth. Productivity coach is not something that we see every day. Tell us a little bit how you got into this space in the first place, and then I have a ton of questions that I would love to ask you.
Okay. Wow. So first of all, productivity coach, in terms of people that say things about productivity, almost every business book today has a chapter on productivity, right? So that's one interesting thing. And we'll talk about that later. Like, you know, how do I differentiate myself? And the way I got into it, because frankly, the first 2 jobs I was in, I did not do very well. I dropped the ball. I just did not do well. And I know it has a lot to do with my ADD, you know, so I couldn't do 2 things at once. I forgot things, things were too hard, and so too difficult. And came to my 3rd job, I was controller, going to be CFO. And I came home and I was like, again, like complaining about the job. And I remember my wife told me, I realized like, wait, this is the 3rd time you're complaining about the job, and, you know, and it's about something's going on. Now, I don't know exactly when it changed or what changed. Definitely the opportunity was good enough for me that I changed something in the way I do things, and it had me overcome or deal with or take away the issues that I got from ADD. And after a few years, you know, somebody asked me, like said, I want you a job. You're an executive. You probably make double as much as I make, and you look like you're never busy. And I was like, what do you mean? You look like you have nothing to do. I said, well, you have nothing to do. He said, you sit at lunch till the end. You come to meetings at the beginning, you leave at the end. You don't do emails in between. You're not running. When you talk to me, you have time. So I basically said, no, come, let's look at my computer. I showed him a bunch of tasks. It was end of the year, even a lot of tasks. And he said, okay, show me how you do things. At that point, really, I showed him, you know, more physical, you know, like this is the way I do it. I use Outlook. I use tasks in Outlook. And then he told a different guy. And so within the company, I taught it to some managers. I taught it to the managers that worked for me and the people who worked for them. And then every time I taught it, I got something it became more quantifiable, more real, like in terms of a training. So it wasn't just, you know, some kind of, I do things in a certain way, because that's really how it started. Yeah. And then I taught it in a company, and that's how I got into it. Right. So, people did well. So
what is it exactly that you do? So let's say if a leader hires you, what do you actually do? Like what are the high level places where you go with a leader to make sure that they maximize their productivity?
Okay. So let's just talk. You said about this in the industry. It's also called time management. That's the main word that people kind of relate to. And obviously, like, what does time manage me? If I manage my time differently, then how's it going to be different? Right.
Sure.
So initially I do a training for the executives. We usually be 5 to 10 people in the training. And within the train, okay, well, let's just say I do a few trainings, and then I do one-on-one. So in the trainings, the main thing that I focus on is teaching people what mental energy suckers are. I call it a mess, mental energy sucker. And when people really get what they are and how it shows up in their workday, that's when people are like, oh my God, that's what it's doing to me. I want to change it. Now I do teach some tools kind of so people get like what it's like. I'm more more than teaching tools, I ask the audience to tell me what they think is a possible tool, right? So I really want to draw it out from people. And then when I sit with them one-on-one, initially I sit every week to figure out something with them that would work for them. And you'd look at 3 different people in the same company. You wouldn't think that they use the same productivity coach, but they do things very differently. So I don't have any hard and fast rules. Eat the frog in the morning or do your emails less than 2 minutes. All these rules I don't have. And so my belief is, right, that it used to be, let's say, Stephen Covey, urgent and don't be an urgent and be an important, a non-urgent and important.
Or David Allen.
Yeah, David Allen. David Allen is, getting things done. His book is like the biggest book. And and the truth is that any of these books, if you follow them, then you're guaranteed to be successful 100%. The thing is that I've asked in my trainings, I always ask who read books. David Allen's book is like the most read and known. And then I say, okay, did you try it? Yes. How long did it work for you? Now, okay, my sample is not true because I'm talking to people that are coming to another productivity training, but I've asked around, and most have gotten at least 100 people that actually read the book and implemented it. And then the most somebody had it was for 2 months. There was one guy that's a speaker and a LinkedIn guy that in a speech, he said, I'm successful because of David Allen's book. The only time I heard somebody that held on to it for years. Aside from that, people they do it. And I think the way it is, they'll read the book, they'll implement everything, and hopefully they'll be left with one little nugget that they stayed with. And every productivity thing is like that. And the reason is, I think, is because it's so boxy and people aren't the same. I'm not the same. You're not the same. Jobs aren't the same and days aren't the same. Sometimes in a good mood, sometimes in a bad mood. So let's say with Eat the Frog, right? So Eat the Frog is a book, right? So you do the most difficult thing in the morning. And I had days where I wasn't in the mood of working and I had this Eat the Frog thing, right? And it's like, I want to eat the frog. And I was like, I found myself at 3:00 still having not eaten the frog, right? So everybody. So in those days, sometimes what happens is I'm not in the mood and I do a few small things. Sometimes even only the small things get done. And sometimes I build it up and then I can eat the frog. So I'm not saying it's not a true concept. It's just not good. People are just different and every day is different. So what I teach people is, what happens is in the first hour, generally, people's head is the clearest, right? Is your head works well. So what happens in the second hour that your head doesn't work so well? Or in the third hour, the fourth hour, in the afternoon? So what happens is that certain things drain your mental energy, quite literally energy, like electric that the brain gets, or energy, glucose that the brain gets, it gets less of it. Because when you're under stress, you have actually some fight or flight response where glucose gets shot into the brain. But that kind of needs the machine, and then you get less glucose later on. So throughout the day, that's our job generally, it's jumping from one thing to the next and being stressed, like it's almost our job. And basically that kills our brain. So slowly we have less and less mental energy. So I don't know if I'll go into a little more detail, that basically what happens is that where is the brain going to conserve energy first? What's the first place that the brain's going to say, I'm not going to give you the energy that I don't have? And that's the prefrontal cortex, because you don't need it to walk and to breathe and all of that. You need it to do calculations, to inhibitions, to do things you don't want to do, and do things you don't want to do, and not do things you do want to do. So, and analyzing, decision making, all of these things. And that's where the brain's going to say, okay, let me not give so much energy here, but the guy doesn't need it to live. And that's what kind of gets less and less throughout the day.
So I appreciate the introduction to this topic. And I think what I took out, a couple of points that I want to go back at, is one of the things I've seen a rhythm now. I think we're up to 180 episodes on this show, and I've been working with a lot of successful business owners throughout the years. And one of the things that the common denominator is they guard their time. Like something that it's not everything yes. And they have the understanding that if I say yes to one thing, I'm saying no to something else. And I think nobody could deny that a lot of success lies within how you manage your time and the productivity. And I think the topic is a very important topic. I guess I want to go back to, and then the other thing that you mentioned, which is I want to make sure that it doesn't go unnoticed, is like every person's different. You know, just I think 2 episodes ago that I interviewed, somebody said that the best time they have in the day is towards the end of the day. And I told them my mornings are my best time of the zone. I call it the green zones. Like when I'm fresh, full energy, as the day goes by, I lose some of that mental, the full energy that I have. So every person is different. So they have to approach productivity different. But I guess I'll get to the question, which is a lot of leaders use the lack of productivity or the lack of time management as I need to be available for my team. And things happen, I need to be available, I have to have an open door. And therefore, I find myself at the end of the day that I had so many things that I wanted to do, but at the end of the day, I didn't do half of it because I was distracted by other people coming in and needing my time. How do you deal with that?
Okay. So you said a lot of things before that if we'll have time. I'll say my two
Sure.
cents on that. But in terms of that, if you ask those leaders, they're giving time to their people, what does that time look like? And this comes from experience. Because everybody is like, I need time for my people. And I said, could you, let's say with one person, I said, can you tell your people that once an hour, you're going to go to them and ask them if they have something to tell you? Okay. And so I don't know if I could do it because they need me and they're not going to feel supported. I said, try it. Nothing's going to happen. And what happened was after a little bit, the people said that they love it. You know why? Because when you sit by my desk, the only thing you're doing is talking to me, nothing else. And usually when you sat with me, you were doing 10 other things as well. Another person called you got away, you got a phone call, you had an email. So actually the being unfocused, that you have to be there for your team is the question, are you really there for your team? And could you be there for your team in a better way? The employees ended up loving it, that although they got her once an hour. And now the way it helps also is that half the time, and almost any leader can appreciate that, Meny, probably you too, half the time a question that seems very urgent and they need you, if within an hour it gets figured out, right? Mm-hmm. Either the person figures that out because it's like, it doesn't feel like the question, oh, I need to ask, let me just Google it. Like they somehow figure it out. So half the questions go away. But the short answer is that they'll be there for their team in a better way if they block out time or if they do their own thing, and then they're fully there for their team.
Yeah, and I always say that it's so much easier for somebody else to make decisions for you. So if you make yourself available, those people will never learn to make their own decisions because they're always going to try to get those decisions from you as a leader. But if you tell them once or twice, I'm not available at the moment, but I'll have time towards the end of the day or something like that, and then once or twice they come to the end of the day, or you go to them at the end of the day, and you see they already solved that issue. You're just training them next time to see, could I solve it without interrupting the leader, so to speak. I think so that sure.
I just want to say something about that is that you said about decision making, that they make the decision. Now, a good leader teaches people to make decisions, and the way they teach is, okay, what do you think? Right? Give me two options. Now, let me think one of the two options, and after the person hears enough times, wow, your decision is good, and even if I might have done your decision, the person starts making decisions on their own. Right? Now, what happens is if the leader is sitting in his emails in the middle of a spreadsheet and on a phone call, and the guy comes in, he doesn't have time to really coach his employee in that way. It's like, okay, just do this and move on. Now, when you do sit with them, you end up having time to train them to make those decisions.
Beautiful. So I want to go back to what you mentioned before about mental energy suckers. I want to go into these details because I think this goes unnoticed for an average person, not really focusing on their the productivity or enhancing their productivity or time management. People that don't realize they need a coach or somebody to help them really get better at it. They totally don't even understand how many suckers are taking some of their time every single day. So tell me what goes into that category and how could people be more conscious about it?
Okay, so it's not time suckers, it's mental energy suckers specifically, and I'll give you a very short synopsis. I break it down to three. It's not, that clear three. This is how I break it down: and choice, noise, and change.
What is it? What are the three?
Choice, noise, and change.
Okay.
So choice is making decisions, and that everybody knows is decision fatigue. So making decisions is very difficult. So just so you know, let's first get that it sucks your mental energy making decisions. So what do I do about it? I need to make decisions, right? There are things to do about it, but it's really, let's get that mental energy sucker. And then noise is any noise. So if you're sitting now and somebody opens the door to your office and then closes it, maybe if you turn around for a second and look at who it is, you get back and you talk to me. First of all, it's going to take your brain like 15 seconds to kind of remember what I'm talking about and be back in the same way as you were before. That's one thing in terms of noise. The second thing that's going to happen is your brain actually gets used up. So let's say there's really noise in the background and you're straining the ears to listen to me. You do it for some time and then it's like, oh, I just need a break, right? So it uses your brain. It sucks your mental energy. So what happens is after noise, there is not a lot of mental energy left, right? Now, noise, the biggest noisemaker is our brain. When our brain tells us, oh my God, you have to have a meeting, you have this, you have to pay the bank, I don't know, whatever it is. You have to buy your wife a gift, buy milk on the way home, meaning even things that are not part of work. They create noise in your brain and they suck your mental energy. So you create noise in your own brain. Again, the question is, how do you deal with it? But think about 300 years ago, people never had this kind of noise. They sat on the field. I don't know. They picked apples all day, right? There was no thing. And then the next thing is change, right? And change is changing from one place to another, from one task to another, from one type of task to another, even talking one person to another. So if you change from the biggest change would be in terms of types of tasks is the task of talking to people. Let's say you talk to me now and you're using your emotive brain, right, to talk to me. And then you sit down and you do some executive things like, okay, let's get this thing done, that, let's follow up, whatever, a bunch of executive things. And then you talk to another person and they do some executive things. It's going to knock you out. And what's going to really knock you out is changing from one thing to the next. And the way you can see it is if a person says, I'm getting phone calls all day and it's crazy, or I'm answering emails all day and it's crazy. So I say, how much time, if you put all the phone calls together, how much time would it take? So let's say it's an hour. If you sat and took these phone calls all within the same hour, would that be as difficult for you? Would you be as knocked out? And feel like, no, why not? That's because you're not changing back and forth. So the actual change is a mental energy sucker. It creates stress in the brain. And some people say, I think better when I'm under stress. Like, I need to get those bunch of things done. I think better. And the truth is that at the moment, you get that extra adrenaline and it pushes more glucose through your machine into your brain. The thing is, if your brain was able to do that all the time, it would do it all the time, but it's not made for it. So it kind of ruins the brain. So slowly, your brain works less and less. So what I do is, how do I give people more time is I give you your best hour's brain throughout the day, right? So you don't just have it your hour in the morning, it stays optimized for longer. So people end up getting done in 6 hours, but used to get done in 8 hours because the brain works better. And you said that some people, the end of day is their best time. Generally, meaning this is scientific. If they sat under stress all day, then the end of day cannot be their best time. It's impossible. And I had the story. I sat with the CEO. I wanted him to do the training, and I want to do his training in his company. And I told him, this is a stat that 70% of employees are productive less than 3 hours a day. Okay, knowledge employees, meaning office employees. And it's crazy when you think about it because they sit at the computer a full
6,
time.
7 days, yeah.
Yeah, 40 hours, they're productive less than 3 hours a day. It's crazy. And I said, I don't think anybody in our environment is productive more than 4 or 5 hours. He told me, no, I'm productive. I do 9 hours in an 8-hour workday. And I said, I was trying to tell him, trying to ask him. He was like not giving up. I was like, okay, I let it go. After we finished on our way out, I know I thought about it and I said, hey, could we meet tomorrow for 15 minutes? And he's like, well, what about? So I said, yeah, just humor me. So he said, yeah, we had a nice conversation. Why not? I said, okay, I'll be here 9 o'clock in the morning. She says, no, not 9 o'clock. I said, oh, you have a meeting? Let's do 9:30. He says, no, it's not that I have a meeting. It's just that I don't meet people in the morning. I said, why? He says, because in the morning I get things done. So I said, did you hear what you just said? In the morning you get things done. In the afternoon. So he realized that in the morning are his prime hours. That's when he really works and gets things done. In the afternoon, he has meetings. Yeah, he does stuff, but he doesn't work. His brain does not work as well as it does in the morning. So the goal is if you minimize those mental energy suckers of choice, noise, and change, so you have less noise in your head, less changes, then your brain stays fresh for longer.
Beautiful. Let me ask you some practical advice as far as you're managing your day. I think what you mentioned now is very much mindset driven, understanding what type of work you do when and how you go from from type of work to type of work. One of the things that, we have to our disposal is calendars. And that's something that once upon a time there was going back and forth, 10 different emails about when can I meet with you and phone calls. And now you send a link and all of a sudden you find yourself a filled up calendar. What are some practical productivity hacks you have seen working, how to utilize properly the calendar and making sure that it's working to your benefit, not against you?
Okay. It's a big question because is it meetings that you cannot get out of? And the question is also...
That's why I asked you. Let's try to differentiate what type of meetings are sitting on that calendar.
Right. Now, and then do you really have 8 hours of meetings a day? And it's not the case. Now, first of all, I would say generally, if you have meetings back to back and you have like 15, 20 minutes between meetings, do not go and do work in that time. I would rather you play around in that time because what's going to happen is that's the change. You change from one thing to the next. I spoke to a therapist and he said, can you explain to me in my language? And I said, you work 45 minutes and then you have 15 minutes. And then what do you do in those 15 minutes? He said, I do work, like I do executive work. I call back and whatever things I need to do. And I said, does that work like that throughout the day? He said, by the time lunch comes around, I'm done. Like meeting people is difficult. So I say, try this, play around those 15 minutes, play Candy Crush, do whatever you want, but don't do any executive work, writing notes, don't do anything. And he came back and he said that the lunch hour and a half that he gave himself, he does executive work, and these 15 minutes he plays around, and he comes home and he does not feel spent and used up. And it wasn't the amount of people he spoke to, it was the change, right?
It's the
So
buffer.
that's one thing. It's so when you say, what does it mean when you say it's a buffer?
Giving yourself that buffer in between, it allows the brain to recharge, so to speak.
Yeah. And my premise is that it's not just about the recharging, which is out there, like you have to recharge your brain, take a walk or whatever. The premise is that even if you do have a buffer, don't go back. If you have after the buffer, you have an extra 15 minutes, don't go back to doing office work for 15 minutes, because then you go back to a meeting, and that's a different type of brain. And if you do that 3 times a day, by the time you finish the meetings, you're not going to do any difficult office work. You're done. You're spent.
Mm-hmm.
So my main thing is that I try to get people to stay with a fuller brain. So that's the one thing in terms of meetings.
So obviously, I just want to make sure I understood it correctly. So are you suggesting batching the same type of tasks, rather batching the same type of tasks again and again and again for half a day, and then second half a day focusing on executive work, versus mixing them up, basically the change part?
So there's a caveat. Like I said in the beginning, people are different. So some people will say, after I do this for 2 hours, I'm not interested in doing something else. So all I say is that there is a cost to changing. Just know that there's a cost. If your benefit is more than the cost, then don't batch it. But there is a cost. The change is going to cost your brain. You only have so much brain that you can use, and your brain energy is going to be a cost. There's going to be a cost on your brain energy. Now, if it's worth it, the cost, then don't do it. But if it's not, then try to batch it. And there's more than just batching it. The main thing is, like, I actually tell people to waste time or talk to people, meet somebody at one-off, follow up on your employees, see how they're doing. So it's still a meeting. It's not office work. But the point is, like, don't get out of one type of task, but batching would be the correct way to do it. Yes.
This episode of the Let's Talk Business podcast is brought to you by the PTEX Group. Whether you're a small business or a large enterprise, whichever industry you work in, there's always a next step for your brand to take. Increasing your sales, expanding markets, getting into big box stores, growing from local brand to household name. Whatever that next iteration of your business is, at PTEX Group, we're here to give you the look, the feel, the voice, and the results that make your brand move forward. Our team of experienced creatives has successfully helped hundreds of brands across nearly every industry, from e-commerce to healthcare to nonprofit and everything in between, take the next step in their brand journey. If you're a driven brand looking to take your business to the next level, give us a call at 888-977-7839. That's 888-977-7839. Or schedule a call at ptexgroup.com/let's talk, and let's create your next. Now, let's get back to the show.
Got it. Let me ask you another question, which I know we all suffer from this, is sometimes we get very excited about taking lead and taking charge of our day. Especially, beginning of the year, people want to start motivated to see change and productivity. And we start off with these large to-do lists, regardless if it's on paper, if it's a system. And then we find ourselves not producing enough. And then we get discouraged. What is some practical advice you would suggest people on how to start putting down those tasks, those to-dos in a way that they don't get discouraged and they do actually do the important stuff?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my thing, right? Choice, noise, and change. What happens is when you have a big to-do list, to me, a to-do list is not about getting things done, but it's about calming your brain down so it doesn't have to create noise. So when you have a big to-do list that you won't finish, or it's impossible to finish, you still have noise in your brain because your brain still wants to get everything done and it doesn't know what it won't get done, right? And the reason I have the to-do list is to save you from all of that noise. So what I say is you go in the beginning of the day and it's very understood. But if you don't trust, the point is you have to have a to-do list that you trust. And if you don't trust it, then you're left with the noise, right? You did nothing. So if you go in the beginning of the day and you cut out everything and I say that you have to be 95% sure that you're going to finish everything on your to-do list. So what I tell people is, does your boss walk into your office and tell you to do things? How many times do people call you? Bio breaks, lunch, whatever you do. Let's count in everything conservatively. So I have clean, concise, conservative, right? So you want to have it conservative, right? And what's the most that the task could take you? Not the least. And then most people end up having, like, let's say 4 hours. In the 8-hour day, I have 4 hours of discretionary time. that I get to work on my to-do list. So now schedule for 4 hours of work. Now, when you schedule those 4 hours, and I work actually when I do it with executives and I work on their to-do list, and I say, no, throw out something else, and they get really upset. And it's like, no. So I tell them, are you going to finish this today? They say, I need to finish this today. So I say, I'm asking, are you going to finish this today? They say, I want to finish this today. And they didn't answer my question.
Yeah.
I want to hear, yes, I will. So sure, it should be simple that wow, that's not a big deal to finish. Your to-do list should never be a motivator. And what I say is if it comes 3 o'clock and you finish your to-do list, nobody is stopping you from taking new tasks. But the whole day, you shouldn't live under the premise that you're going to finish what you know you won't finish. So the simplest thing in to-do list is cut things out as much as possible that you know you won't do or that you don't know for sure that you will do, then cut them out of your to-do list. If you want, I tell people, create a wish list for the day. So you have a task list and a wish list. And now another thing with the to-do list is, and 2 other things is that it should be clean. This is kind of a backup to your brain, right? I want my brain to not have noise. If this is the backup, it has to be clean. If it's messy and all over the place, your brain is still scared. You won't find it. You won't see it. If it sees 10 tasks and they're lined up very simply and you can see them in a second, then your brain's able to let go and know that it's on the list and you're going to do it. And then concise, that the task name at least should be 2 words. And the rest of the task, you can have like all the information and everything, because the task is only the actual, sweep the floors is a task. And then take a broom and a shovel and talk to this guy, all of that, right? That's not a task. I don't know why I used that. But anyway, simplest. But basically, my point is that, so having each task concise is also very easy on the brain to use the paper as a backup, to use the to-do list as a backup. Now, I know the way I'm talking about these things is probably very unlike the things you've heard about productivity. And the truth is that all of the productivity books out there are really solving these problems, but they're being very boxy and saying, do it like this. So let's say David Allen says, when you go through your emails, if it's less than 2 minutes, then you should do it with now. If it's not less than 2 minutes,
schedule it for later.
Now, the way I do it, first of all, I teach people to go through their emails in average of less than 2 seconds of email. I actually sit with a stopwatch and like this, and I have to average of less than 2 seconds. So I have to email with just garbage, and I teach them how to say they're doing it today or they're not doing it today, right? So the choices are less, but they have to make less decisions. So I make less choices. Going back to the choice is also a mental energy sucker or a mess. And what ends up happening is most people, because I found all the executives, and I was an executive myself, walk around, it's like, oh, my emails. They're always thinking about their emails, and the emails create noise. They're sitting in the meeting thinking every minute, my emails, right? What is going on in my emails? Now, if they know that within 3 minutes, they could go through all of the emails and see if there's something huge, then all of a sudden the email it's not a big deal, because they could always, between meetings, just pop through all the email very quickly, right? Yeah. Just to find if there's something.
It reminded me a story that I once shared. It was an executive that spoke, like, if you speak to any larger executive from a larger company, and you ask them, like, what's the origin story? They'll say, I started as the person sorting the mail. And then I got promoted to be a secretary, and then I'm an assistant, and so on and so forth, till I became the CEO of the company. What I do now, I actually sort mail again. I keep on refreshing my inbox. So all these,
that's really funny.
So he wasted all these years to be back at sorting their inbox, which is exactly like sorting the mail room. Yeah. I just want to add something that you mentioned before. I think it's so important about the to-do. So you mentioned the point of making sure that if, anything that doesn't belong on the to-do list shouldn't even be there. I've seen this is something that works for me. Like I said, every person's different. I would create a to-do list, and I would go back and actually create a must-do list out of my to-do list. That could be either underscoring, highlighting. And the reason what I choose as must-dos are stuff that sometimes are not the easy stuff, but I must get it done finally because somebody else is waiting for it, or my company needs it, or I need it for myself to know that I've done it. So all of a sudden, my long to-do list became a short must-do list. And that's where the things where I start. And then as soon as I'm done with these things, I could go back to the to-do list and figure out what is my next batch of items that I want to get done.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a big no-no on podcast probably. Are you okay if I challenge you?
Sure. Excellent.
Okay, so when you have a to-do list and you underline the must-dos, what does it mean? It means that you're not sure that you're going to finish that to-do list. So you underline the must-dos so that you know that these you're going to finish. Correct?
So the must-dos is similar to, let's say, in a system, you would prioritize your tasks. So these are the things that from this list, if I start in the order of priority, these are the things that I have to get done first.
Right. So I would invite you to try. Once I set my day up, there is no order of priority because everything is getting done that's on that list. Now,
Got it.
obviously, when I go through the list, there's going to be only 8 things on the list. So it's going to be easy to choose. And I would invite you to try that and let me know, how it works for you, where instead of you don't underline, because underlining and prioritizing means that you don't think that you're going to finish the list. And the list should be,
True.
know it's getting finished. So then there's no prioritizing and no underlines. Now, there's another reason that why prioritizing and underlining makes it is why it disturbs you, okay? Because when you have to, especially if you have to prioritize, people color code it and they do 1, 2, and 3. So when things are not simple and easy to do, people end up not doing it, right? So if throughout the day, sometimes things become must-dos, they don't become must-dos, right? And you put them on the list, take them off. And now having to think again, besides for putting it on the list, you have to think, is it a must-do? What level priority is it? And then make a decision. And that becomes difficult to do, which makes people end up not doing it. And I'm sure you're doing it for some time, meaning that you are able to do it, right?
No, one of the things I have the podcast because I learned first. So, there's always room for improvement. We always look for new hacks and ways how to improve. Speaking about improvement.
Just a second. So basically what I want you to do is take your to-do list and take all, not must-dos, take all the will-dos and put them in a separate list. And then you have the other list, but take the will-dos and then you have a will-do list. Make sense?
Beautiful, beautiful. We'll try it out. Speaking about that, I want to ask you is how much have you seen? You've been working with so many business owners. There's an old saying that a cluttered desk is a cluttered mind. For productivity purposes, what correlation have you found of people having great environments around them, surrounding them, from just the appearance of the office to the cleanliness and the unclutteredness of their desk to their actual productivity?
Obviously, the people don't even know it and they don't realize it. But the first thing I do when I come to their desk is clean it. And then every time I come, they're like, I just cleaned my desk because I was scared of you. And now I clean it. When I see a clean desk, I say, like, there is nothing on the desk aside for what you're doing right now, unless it's officially in a pile of whatever, like something, like it's in a task pile, but sticky notes on the walls or whatever. So, and I'll explain to you why it doesn't work. First, just let me tell you, I was going for an interview for my daughter into going to high school, and the principal had on his desk that a cluttered desk is a sign of genius. So before I left, I said, I just can't not say it. I'm sorry. I hope it doesn't kill the interview, but just get rid of that because it's not true. I know stupid people that have cluttered desks. I know, and the cluttered desk actually kills you. So anyway, he actually asked me, can you tell me in 2 words, what is your thing? And I can tell you now, and I said the 2 words, I thought for a second, I said, quiet brain. That's a trick to productivity. So if you could work all day with a quiet brain, then you're going to be so much more productive. And in a sense, it's almost like let's say if you work and things pop in, what do you call that? It's stress. If you work and nothing else pops in, you're only working on what you're working. Some people would call that meditation, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea of a quiet brain. Anyway, so I came home to my son and my son says, how about you should have said this, where, it's a sign of genius. And if you only unclutter your desk, you'll get much more of that genius, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But basically what happens is people have things on their desk and they tell me, no, I'm not even looking at it, right? So let's say I had an executive that didn't have things on the desk. They had moved, I think 6 years before, and she had cases of files from before they moved that was near her desk. And I said, let's move these files away. I'm not throwing them out. Let's move them somewhere else. So she said, no. So I said, why? So I said, are you working on it now? No, but that's how I remember I'm working on it. And it doesn't bother me because I don't really see it. So I said, so why do you want them here? Because that's how I remember. So I said, when do you remember? When you see it, right? How many times a day do you see it? Now, I understand that the 500 times a day that you see it, it's only a split second and you say, no, I'm not looking at it. But that's noise. So when you have a ton of things on your desk, the cluttered desk, really what's going on is it's a bunch of things you have to work on. It's a to-do list. It's another to-do list. And the to-do list, it's not even a will-do list, right? You don't even know that you're going to do it. And they're cluttering your brain the whole time. And it's not, if these papers were papers that had nothing to do with you, then it wouldn't be considered clutter, at least in my world. I get it, clutter, like it's cluttered, but there could be a design of the desk. I don't care. But once these things mean something to you, every time you see that sticky note, it's like, oh, I have to do it. Oh, no, not now, right? So you have hundreds of those the whole time.
Very much. And speaking about desks and offices, is there anything that you tell, let's say, people before they move or they set up their office arrangement of desks, anything that you have found to be a huge distraction for productivity?
No. The only thing I've had is people having 2 desks. So executives have it many times. One is with the employees and one is inside an office. And my suggestion is that because having tasks or like papers on two desks or, task feeders, right? It could be a task list or whatever. So basically what I tell them is that one desk should be your home desk. And that's where anything that you must do today or whatever it is should be on that desk. And the other desk is not your real desk, right? It's like where you're a guest. How to set up desks? I don't know, like basically to set it up between people or not with, that's the question.
Yeah. So I guess it goes together with, people speak about open cubicles or closed cubicles. I think there is room for both, for the argument on both sides, because sometimes the closed, you spend much more time running and chasing after each other, while sometimes open space is a lot of noise, as you mentioned before, and distractions.
So actually the biggest noise with open cubicles would be, because you said it's easy to get to people. And that's the worst part, because then people disturb me constantly. Right now,
Correct.
Even when somebody has an open cubicle, what I teach people to say is it important for now? If not, and they put it down on a piece of paper. Okay, I have to get down to this guy. I used to write down extension numbers while I was working. People called me. I wrote down extension numbers, usually in the office. And as soon as I finished, I called back all the extensions. The only extension I picked up was my boss. Obviously, had to pick up, and I would tell him, "Is it important for now or not? Can I call you back in a half hour?" And I put down the extension number. Now, note. First of all, I didn't get disturbed, meaning it didn't create as much noise. It was just picking up, and then I went back to my thing. And second of all, I didn't remember in my head that I have to call these people back. I put it down on my piece of papers, and then I called back all these people. So now, sitting in a cubicle, or there are companies that have they want to kind of keep the small company situation. So they have like a phone system where I could just dial in and be talking to the person in the next desk without them picking up, right? It kind of it's extremely intrusive in whatever I'm doing now. And that creates a lot of noise and disturbance and change. So people should be wary of that wherever they could. Now, obviously, if your manager comes to your cubicle, you can't tell them come back later. You can ask, but many of them you can say, "Can I come to you later?" Right? Say sure, right? And then you can finish doing what you're doing now.
Got it. Let me end with a question similar to what we started. So we spoke about people are limited with the amount of hours, and you have the same amount of hours than everybody in the world, so to speak. If somebody would challenge you to say, if I want to gain an hour in my day, where should be the first place I'm looking for that time? What would you tell that person?
Noise, to-do list, tasks. If you want to gain an hour, and I'm telling you, I think I'm an hour, a half hour. If you do your will-do list, because you don't have to go through it and your brain could rely on it, you're not going to have I'm going to ask you actually, the must-dos come up in your brain throughout the day, even though they're on the list?
Of course.
Okay. The goal would be that you shouldn't even remember what you need to do. Because now I'm doing this, I don't need to remember. I'm just doing what I'm doing now. And if the must-dos would be on a will-do list, on a list that you know you could finish, and you learn to trust that list, then you'll end up gaining more time because your brain is going to work better throughout the day. And what I could say is that the story was like the boss called me and said, since this executive did your training, she's not loyal to the company. And I know that as a business coach, you empower people. Like, what did you talk to her about? Whatever. And I wasn't sure. And I basically asked her, spoke to her, what's going on? And she said, is there any fallout? So he said, he didn't tell me. I actually asked him after, was there anything that you saw? He said, I don't know, but I don't see everything. So I wouldn't know. So I asked her, she said, no, there isn't any. But she was a single girl. So I used to sit there until 10 o'clock at night. And that's when I was able to answer phones until 10 o'clock at night. And now I finished by 6 o'clock. And at some point, she actually told me she finishes by 2 o'clock. She has nothing left to do by 2 o'clock because she finished her day.
Organized.
So she had 15 employees. So she's just there for her employees. So the point is that people actually gain time. Yeah, because they have more of their brain.
Beautiful. Shea, where can people find out more about what you do?
SheaMyski.com. I give you my phone number, SheaMyski.com, or achievemore.work. Okay, that's also going to get to me at SheaMyski.com. And they could email me to Shea@SheaMyski.com. So it's SheaMyski.com. And could I say one more thing?
Sure.
Okay. Because you said about time guarding initially, and I want your whole day to be time guarded. And again, if you have a will-do list, your time is guarded always. You don't do two things at once, ever, right? So it's not just for the big things you guard time, even for the small things, even for employees. I want the time I talk to the employees to be time guarded, obviously, right? So you're right. Everybody that's successful has to do that. They have guard time, and it's not just that. It's for an hour. they're able to work on only one thing and think about nothing else. And then they're able to put in their full brain. But imagine doing that all day. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
For the links, resources mentioned in this episode, check out the show notes at www.ptexgroup.com/podcast. We will link to find out more about Shea. Let's close with the 4 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Oh, I don't know. You didn't tell me about them. Okay, go.
Number 1, a book that changed your life.
Eckhart Tolle. I forgot the name of the book, but The Power of Now.
Power of Now. Number 2, a piece of advice you got that you'll never forget.
Actually, my boss came in initially and he saw me having 10 sticky notes on my desk. He took them all off and he said, it doesn't belong like that. And that's part of what got me into my training. So that's what I'm thinking now. I don't know. I'm sure there's
Beautiful. Beautiful. Number 3, anything you wish you could go back and do differently.
Oh, everything. A lot. I don't know where to start.
Anything comes to mind.
And the truth is, I'm thinking, like, let's say in terms of my previous job where I failed, I could have done better. But the truth is, this is what got me into what I'm doing today.
Exactly.
No. I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. And everything comes to mind. Yeah.
Last and final question. What's still on your bucket list to achieve?
Do a speech for 100,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that you're working on a book.
Yes. How do you know?
I know.
I see. Oh, yeah. I'm working on a book, and hopefully that's going to help propel me there. It's going to be good enough. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Shea, thank you so much for joining us. I know your time is valuable. That is why, in the name of our listeners, we'll forever be grateful for sharing some of your time with us today. It's been a blast.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Nice talking to you, Meny.
Likewise.